Welcome to Module 8. In this part of the lecture, we will compare the organs associated with the female reproductive system of the different domestic animals. At the end of this presentation, each student should be able to compare the morphology of the female reproductive tract and study the reproductive tract of female birds. The female reproductive system is the part of the female animal responsible for the production of oocytes. It is generally composed of the paired ovaries and oviduct, the uterus, and the vagina with the vestibule and vulva. As different animals bear different number of young, gross morphology of the system vary greatly. For instance, large animals like mare and cow normally bear only one young per gestation and are classified as monotocous. On the other hand, other animals like bitch, queen, and sow are birthing multiple offspring simultaneously and are classified as polytocous. This makes the ovaries and the uterus of these animals vary in appearance. Let us first compare the ovaries. The ovaries possess both gametogenic and endocrine functions. Each ovary is a solid, basically ellipsoidal body, although commonly made irregular by the projection from the surface of large follicles and corpora luteum. The irregularity is naturally greatest in polytocous animals in which follicles ripen in batches. Here you can see the variations in the ovarian morphology. In bitch, the ovaries are oval in shape and the surface may be rough and nodular. However, this is not evident in this image. In sow, the ovaries can be distinguished by the many follicles and the corpora lutea that project from the entire surface. In cow, the ovaries are relatively small with firm, rather irregular ovoid body. Follicles and corpora lutea may project from any part of the surface. Just to show you, here is a cow ovary with the mature corpus luteum projecting from the surface. In the mare, the shape is different from the rest. It is kidney or bean shape in appearance because of the presence of the ovulation fossa. This is a deep indentation at the free margin of the organ where all mature follicles rupture. Here are the schematic illustrations of a sagittally sectioned ovaries of a cow and a mare. Normally, the ovaries are divided into a cortex and medulla. The cortex is composed of the parenchymatous zone where the follicles are located, while the medulla is the vascular zone where the blood vessels are mostly situated. This pattern is evident in all domestic mammals except in horses. This is reversed in mares where the parenchymatous zone with follicles form the center of the ovary. This is also the reason why they have the ovulation fossa. As we recall, the oocyte produced by the ovary will move to the oviduct or the uterine tube. This is composed of the infundibulum, the ampulla, isthmus, and the two openings called the abdominal and the uterine ostium. There is no much difference among domestic animals with regards to the oviduct except for their length. One comparison that we can also check is the uterotubal junction or the junction between the oviduct and the uterus. This is being marked by the uterine ostium. The junction is gradual in ruminants and in pigs, but shows an abrupt junction in the horse and in carnivores, in which the uterine ostium is located on the top of a papilla. Here you can see the papilla in the uterotubal junction in mares. Next, we move to the uterus. Most domestic animals are classified as bicornuate and has a single cervix, single uterine body, and paired uterine horns. In bitch, it is Y-shaped because it has relatively straight and long horns, short body, and a short cervix. In sow, the body is short but the uterine horns are extremely long and flexus. In live animals, the uterus resembles coils of intestines. The cervix is also long, and the cervix has a structure called pulvini cervicalis. Here is an actual image of a sow reproductive tract to show the pulvini cervicalis in much detail. These are rows of prominences which interdigitate into the lumen of the cervix of a sow. In cow, The uterus has a short body and long uterine horns that coiled ventrally on itself. The cervix has longitudinal and transverse folds internally. The presence of intercornual ligament between the two uterine horns can be mistaken by some that the body of the uterus of a cow is long. You can also notice the round structures at the horn. These are thickenings in the uterine mucosa resulting from the proliferation of the subepithelial connective tissue. They are called caruncles. This is the only site in the uterus to form attachment with the fetal membranes. The fetal counterpart of this is called cotyledon, and together they formed the placentome. In mares, the body of the uterus is relatively large, about the length of the uterine horn, forming a letter T shape. They also have a wide lumen. We can also observe some variation in terms of the morphology of the cervix. Please note that the cervix is part of the uterus. Here is an enlarged schematic illustration of the cervices to obviously show the difference. In mare, bitch, and queen, the mucosal folds are arranged longitudinally. In cow, the lumen is obstructed by circular folds called plicae circulares. In sow, the circular folds form rows of prominences called pulvini cervicales, as we had shown in the previous slides. Now we proceed to the last segment, which is composed of the vagina, the vestibule, and the vulva. Let us recall the boundary of each parts. The vagina extends from the external ostium of the uterus to the entrance of the urethra. Here is the external uterine ostium, and here is the external orifice of the ureter. Thus, here is the vagina. Recall that the vagina extends at the external orifice of the ureter, so we can conclude that the vagina is entirely for the reproductive system and no urine is passing through. There are no major variation among domestic animals, but we can say that the hymen is prominent in mare and sow compared to others. On the other hand, the vestibule extends from the external urethral opening to the external vulva. Here is the extent of the vestibule. In cow and in sow, the urethra forms a ventral evagination called suburethral diverticulum. It opens together with the urethra into the vagina. This arrangement can complicate catheterization of the urinary bladder. The vulva is the outermost part of the female reproductive tract. It is formed by two labia that meet at the dorsal and ventral commissures surrounding the vertical vulvar opening. As reference, here is the dorsal commissure and here is the ventral commissure. The dorsal commissure is rounded and the ventral one is pointed among domestic animals, except in the mare, in which the pattern is reversed. Now let us study the anatomy of the reproductive tract of a female bird. It is good to highlight that during development, birds have paired structures, but in most species, only the left side reaches functional maturity and the right-sided structures rapidly regress after hatching. Here is the reproductive tract of a hen. The mature ovary resembles a bunch of grapes of various sizes that is broadly attached to the cranial division of the left kidney. The mature oocyte of birds is the largest female gametes in the animal kingdom. The oviduct is composed of the infundibulum, the magnum, isthmus, uterus, and the vagina. The infundibulum has a fluted and tubular parts. The oocyte passes through the infundibulum in about 15 minutes. Fertilization, if it is going to occur, takes place in the infundibulum. The magnum measures around 30 cm and is the longest segment of the duct. Its walls carry massive mucosal folds and are thickened by the glands that contribute about half of the total albumin to the egg. The egg takes around 3 hours to pass through this part. Isthmus is about 8 cm long and is demarcated from the magnum by a narrow translucent glandular zone. It is thinner and with lower mucosal folds than the magnum. It secretes more albumin and also a material that rapidly congeals to form the double-layered shell membranes found between the albumin and the shell. The egg takes upward of 1 hour to traverse the isthmus. The uterus is also considered as the shell gland. It has a thinner wall, slightly enlarged chamber, and around 8 cm long. The mucosa bears many low folds and ridges that flatten themselves against the egg, which remains here for about 20 hours. In this image, you can see the uterus with the egg inside. Finally, the vagina, which is a muscular and approximately 8 cm long. Sperm host glands may also be found at the uterovaginal junction where the sperm can be stored for many months. And that ends our discussion on the comparative anatomy of the female reproductive system.